Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's Ask the Expert webinar on sorting, biosafety, and sample handling. Our speakers are Deneen Kozaris and Max Starch. Deneen is a research application scientist at BD covering the New England area. She has 21 years experience in clinical and research flow cytometry, including successfully managing a FACScore facility for a large research department at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston for 14 years. Our second speaker, Max Starch, is a technical support scientist at BD. He holds a PhD in biochemistry from the University of South Carolina, where his research focused on understanding subcellular compartment redox states and mechanisms governing redox homeostasis. Following his PhD training, he was a postdoctoral researcher at the J. David Gladstone Institute of Neurological Disease. Max has over 5 years experience in flow cytometry and cell sorting applications. Before I hand over to our speakers, I would like to go over a few important pieces of information. If you have any questions during the webcast, please submit them through the Q&A widget of your console. Our technical application scientists will be answering them on the back end, and after the presentation, we will be having a live Q&A session with our speakers. For the best viewing experience, we recommend using a wired internet connection and closing any programs or browser sessions running in the background that could cause issues. Some networks cause slides to advance more slowly than others, so logging off your VPN is recommended. If your slides are behind, pushing F5 on your keyboard will refresh the page. You can find additional answers to some common technical issues located in the Help Engagement tool at the bottom of your screen. Lastly, a recording of this broadcast will be made available after the presentation. Look out for an email with additional details on where to access it. And with that, thanks again for joining us, and I'm handing over to our speakers.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Annalise, for that introduction. So for today's Ask the Expert webinar, we want to discuss the biosafety and sample handling when we're cell sorting. And we'll be reviewing the biosafety features with our FACSAria, our FACSAria Fusion, and the FACSMelody cell sorter. So my name is Deneen Kozaris, and I'm the research application scientist based in Boston. And my colleague, Max, will be joining me in the second half of the talk, and he'll be discussing aseptic preparation for your cell sorter. So when we talk about biosafety, we need to think about the risks and the hazards. And the hazards are generally classified in 3 categories that include biological, physical, and chemical hazards. But today, we want to focus on the biological hazards as they relate to cell sorting. So the biosafety risks become elevated with cell sorting as we run the risk of aerosolizing our samples. Now, this creates additional modes of exposure to a biohazardous or potentially infectious substance through inhalation. So as you're all aware, we're living in some unprecedented times, and it's fast-moving related to our health, our safety, and COVID-19. Things are changing day by day, so we should always look to those resources of the CDC, the NIH, and ISAC for the most up-to-date information. And you're strongly encouraged to follow your respective institutional guidelines for handling potentially infectious samples. Sorting in a BSL2 or higher, you should be aware of the options available on the FACSAria family and the FACSMelody cell sorters to protect yourself from these exposures. Discussing biosafety, BD Biosciences does not have any specific recommendations for handling samples potentially carrying or infected with coronavirus. So as part of best practice, it is recommended that patient samples are fixed per your laboratory's SOP, your standard operating procedure, and guidelines before you run them on a flow cytometer. We would also like to remind you that sorting infectious samples can potentially create hazardous aerosols that can carry infectious particles. So please exercise the utmost caution while handling these samples for the sake of your own health and the health of your coworkers. And you're strongly encouraged to follow your respective institutional guidelines. But before we discuss biosafety features on the FACSREN FACSMatters, let's take a look at the history of biosafety and its importance. Now, the American Biological Safety Association had its first unofficial meeting at Camp Detrick in 1955, and the opening keynote address was the role of safety in biological warfare efforts. Now, we have to remember this was the 1950s, and it was a crazy time after World War II and the start of the Cold War. But a couple years later, the meeting included non-classified sessions to broaden the reach of the association. And in the 60s, about 10 years later, the NIH and the CDC joined, and they were followed by private labs, universities, hospitals, and industry a year later. So if we look at the OSHA regulations from 1973, the association viewed it as the most important social legislation since Social Security. I also included a link about the history of biosafety, and it's an interesting read if you want to take a look. Now, I'm all sure we've heard of the stories about former colleagues or lab members that used to smoke or eat in the lab while they were doing their work. Luckily, it was before my time. I even remember one of my colleagues talking about how they mouth pipetted and didn't wear masks when dealing with patient samples. Well, as you can see, we've come a long way since the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. Now, as a resource, we have included the links to the CDC and the WHO regarding sample handling and COVID-19. So you're strongly encouraged to follow your institutional guidelines for handling potentially infectious samples. And my colleague Max will be talking later in this presentation. He will go into a deeper discussion about those links at the end of the talk. But you should also become familiar with ISAC's biosafety and self-sorting guidelines, but again, working with your laboratory environmental health and safety officer to abide by any regulations your institute or company have in place. I have also included a link to the user guide of the FACSREN Fusion and the FACSMelody. So when sorting, you increase the biohazard risk. The aerosols that are generated in the sort block, where the droplets are located, can get into the lungs and cause infection, even if general lab use has a low risk. And those aerosols can be breathed in if it's not managed properly. So the NIH guidelines recommend using a BSL-2 with enhanced precautions when you're sorting human samples. But you should also familiarize yourself with the risk of each agent or biological sample that you're working with in sorting. Take a look at the added safety feature on the FACSREN, the FACSMelody. The Whisper Aerosol Management option, or the AMO, it's equipped with a filter, the ultra-low penetration air filter, which captures the particles and microorganisms down to the size of 0.2 microns at the efficiency of greater than 99.9%. But it needs to be mentioned that BD Biosciences has not tested the AMO on coronavirus. So therefore, universal precautions, personal protection equipment, and working with your lab's environmental safety officer is needed. So now, when we're working with the AMO in a normal sorting condition, we want to keep that AMO at a low setting the entire time you're sorting. And running it at that low setting of 20%, it will not disturb that sort stream by that airflow. But of course, when a clog occurs, we need to increase the aerosol management system to the highest setting and run it for 60 seconds. And it will evacuate the particles from the sort block before you want to open any of the doors on the cell sorter. I've also included a link to the AMO from our BD website. So if you have a FACSMatters Fusion, it has its own integrated aerosol management system within the biological safety cabinet. So if we look at the biological safety cabinet, it's the safest option to contain those aerosols. 1, it protects the user. 2, it helps keep the sample protected from contamination. And 3, it protects the environment from hazardous materials that are contained within the cabinet. Now, as cell sorters have evolved, so have the biosafety cabinets. And when the FACSMatters cell sorter first came out, it wasn't encased in a hood, but BD worked with Baker to design a biological safety cabinet to house the FACSMatters. With the introduction of the FACSMatters Fusion, we took biosafety into account and again worked with Baker to house the Fusion within a smaller footprint of biosafety cabinet. So if we look at the biosafety cabinet in the Fusion, the sorter is, the hardware of the sorter is located in the hood, and the biosafety protection is provided by a negative pressure and controlled airflow within the cabinet. Now, before that air enters the work area or leaves the top of the cabinet, air will pass through those HEPA filters, those high-efficiency particulate air filters. But we do also have an integrated aerosol management system, an AMS, that operates independently of that cabinet blower and provides additional biosafety protection. So when you're working inside the biosafety cabinet, you need to keep the blower on at all times when you're sorting, and you need to keep that view screen closed to the safe access opening of 8 inches when you're loading and unloading your samples and retrieving your collection tubes and plates. But with the additional feature of the AMS, you need to have that as well running on low while you're sorting. And if a clog does occur, you need to increase the AMS to the highest level through the control panel, and again, wait for 60 seconds to allow those potential hazardous aerosols to evacuate before you open that sort block. As you can see, we have our FACSMatters is in the larger biological safety cabinet on the right, and the FACSMatters Fusion is housed in the smaller cabinet on the left. And in the middle, we have our FACSMatters. And the FACSMatters is in the custom Class 2 biological safety cabinet, which meets personal and product protection standards for the FACSMatters, and also meets ISAC guidelines for biosafety and cell sorting. So it also includes that built-in aerosol management system that operates independently of the cabinet, and the biosafety cabinet also is equipped with HEPA filters and vertical laminar flow within that work area. So this Class 2 biosafety cabinet can be used in a BSL-1, BSL-2, or BSL-3 laboratory. So as we can see, these aerosol management options and the biological safety cabinets with that integrated aerosol management system are added features that BD Biosciences have available for our FACSMatters family, the ARIA and the Fusion, and the FACSMatters cell sorters. So at this point, I would like to thank everyone and hand it over to my colleague Max, who will discuss preparing your cell sorter for aseptic sorts as well as cleaning options and long-term maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. At this point, we have focused on protecting ourselves as operators from potentially hazardous samples in the context of cell sorting on BD Biosciences platforms. More specifically, we are discussing options as well with BD sorters to help protect operators from potentially infectious or biohazardous aerosols that can be produced during our sorts. So the other component of this is, what do we do now that we've run a potentially biohazardous sample on our BD cell sorter? So we're now going to shift the discussion to some of the available cleaning options that we have depending on the platform that you have in context of those being highlighted in this webinar. Looking at the ARIA family on the left, we can see a variety of cleaning options that are accessed via the cytometer menu in the software. On the right-hand side, the FACSMatters cell sorter in FACSCora software prompts a couple of available cleaning modes in the wizard-based software startup. There are some additional cleaning modes that are accessible through the cytometer tab in the software interface toolbar. The next couple of slides, we're going to get into the specifics of these cleaning modes and when we may consider running them. So in the context of the BD FACS ARIA family of cell sorting platforms, we have 6 different cleaning modes accessed through the cytometer tab of the software. These include our fluidic startup, which involves flushing existing fluid from the sheath path and replacing this with sheath fluid, and is typically performed daily or as needed. Conversely, the next cleaning option we have is a fluidic shutdown. And in this case, we're going to fill the sheath path with 70% ethanol, which can be done daily, weekly, or as needed just to maintain a clean system. There's also the option for sample line backflush, which is designed to reduce carryover between samples. And this can also be done in a situation where you notice a drop in event rate in order to preempt a clog, for example, which is one of the ways that aerosols can be produced. The flow cell clean procedure is designed to clean the sample path as well as the flow cell. And this can be done daily with DI water as a cleaning procedure, or with a mild detergent if needed to help mitigate high CVs or distorted scatter. The ARIA family has a fluidics cart, which is equipped with additional tanks used in the final cleaning mode, which is prepare for aseptic sort. We'll get into that in just a moment. But with this fluidics cart, we have an additional cleaning mode that allows us to prime after a tank refill. And this can be used to remove air from the filters in the fluidics cart or the fluidics drawer. And most typically, this is done in advance of preparing for aseptic sort once we've filled those tanks. The final mode is what we are going to focus on in terms of decontaminating our BD platforms highlighted in this particular webinar. Prepare for aseptic sort is going to clean all of your sheath lines and the sample line with a series of bleach, water, and ethanol. This procedure can be run when needed before aseptic sorting or in the event of preparing for long-term storage on the instrument, which we'll also discuss in a little bit more detail later on. So looking at the BD FACSMatters cell sorter, you'll recognize some similar cleaning modes from the previous slide where we were discussing the FACS ARIA family. One of the main differences here is the FACSMatters does not have a dedicated fluidics cart associated with it. Thus, the prepare for aseptic sort mode is performed a bit different, utilizing traditional sheath tanks rather than the 5-liter tanks the ARIA family has on the cart. You will have the system startup that is wizard-based and is going to incorporate running a fluidics startup, as well as CS&T, so our instrument QC, and our drop delay, which is performed daily or as needed. Conversely, the long-term shutdown is going to be performed to fill the sheath path with 70% ethanol, and this is going to be performed daily, weekly, or as needed just to maintain a clean system. The sample line backflush is going to serve the same function on this platform, so it's designed to reduce carryover between samples or to help prevent an impeding clog in the sample line. The flow cell clean is designed to clean the sample path as well as our flow cell, which can be incorporated on a daily basis using DI water as part of the shutdown, or with a mild cleaning solution if detector CVs are high, or you also notice a distortion in scatter. Finally, we have the Prepare for Aseptic Sort, which is designed to clean all of your sheath lines and the sample line with, again, bleach, water, and ethanol. So this is going to be similar to what we discussed in the previous slide with the FACSMatters family in terms of function. This is recommended to be performed as needed to prepare for aseptic sorting or in the event of preparing for long-term storage, and will be the focus of the next few slides. Okay, so for discussion purposes, I am going to be graphically walking through the Prepare for Aseptic Sort procedure as it relates more directly to the BD FACSMatters family of cell sorters that does include that Fluidics cart we've discussed, and you can see on the left-hand side of the slide here depicted. This particular slide is depicting the Fluidics path when we're actually running a sample. So the pre-sorted sample, if we start from the right here of the slide, is going to be loaded into the sample injection chamber via a sample tube. From here, the pinch valve is opened. This allows sample to pass through the sample line en route to the flow cell. Simultaneously, sheath is being passed from the sheath tank on the cart through the sheath filter en route to the flow cell as well. Particles are then encapsulated in droplets of sheath post-interrogation in the flow cell, where they can then be sorted into collection tubes or routed to the waste tank via the aspirator. So now that we've depicted our path of the sample, we can visually understand what parts of the fluidics and the instrument our sample sees that can potentially become contaminated with biohazardous or even infectious material. These components are what the Prepare for Aseptic Sort procedure is targeting when we are using it to decontaminate our system. Once we've filled our Fluidics cart with the appropriate fluids, and we've also primed, the first step is going to pass 10% bleach through our Fluidics path. So 10% bleach will be filtered after leaving that 5-liter tank on our Fluidics cart en route to the flow cell. The sample line pinch valve is going to be open during this process, which is going to allow our 10% bleach to be flushed through the sample line, back through the bulk injection, and to the waste tank via the sample line aspirator that sits at the bottom of that bulk injection chamber. Notice that this procedure is going to involve the closed loop nozzle, as some of you may be familiar, which is going to allow us to bypass fluid from routing to the sort block aspirator, and it's just going to go directly to waste. So it's essentially creating a closed system. Second step of this is a repeat of the first run, essentially, in terms of where we're passing fluid. However, in exchange of 10% bleach, we're now going to be running DI water. So in this step, we're passing DI water from that 5-liter tank, the dedicated tank on the Fluidics cart, through the filter towards our flow cell. Again, the sample line pinch valve is going to be open during this process, which is going to allow DI water to be flushed back through the sample line, through our bulk injection, and to waste via that same aspirator that is at the bottom of our bulk injection. This procedure, of course, again, is incorporating our closed loop, which creates a closed system and passes our DI water straight to waste. And one of the purposes of this procedure is prior to running ethanol, we want to make sure we're flushing that bleach so we mitigate any chemical reaction that would occur between, in our fluidics between bleach and ethanol. And so the final stage, we're almost there, is going to be running 70% ethanol through our fluidics path. In this step, we're going to pass 70% ethanol from the dedicated 5-liter tank through that filter towards the flow cell. And then again, our pinch valve is open during this process, which allows that ethanol to go through our sample line, through our bulk injection into the waste via the aspirator at the bottom of the bulk injection chamber. And again, it is our closed loop is in place, which creates our closed system. So we're not getting anything directly to that sort block aspirator. It's just going straight to waste via our closed loop nozzle. And one thing to note as well is that with the fluidics cart, the FACSMatters family is going to run through all 3 of these solutions sequentially until the entire process is complete. So once you begin this, you're not going to be stopping between any of these solutions. For example, it's going to go through all 3 for you and then move to completion. Okay. So this is depicting the procedure through the software, the same prepare for aseptic sort, in the BD FACSMatters self-sorting platform. So the outcome of this procedure for the FACSMatters is going to be the same idea as the FACSMatters family. One of the major differences here is that the FACSMatters does not have a fluidics cart associated. Thus, it's driven through the use of stainless steel tank and possibly an additional stainless steel tank if that was purchased. The procedure is laid out in a wizard format like you see here. And from the Prepare for Aseptic Sort wizard, you get an overview of the entire process. This is also broken down step by step with an explanation of each step, and the flushing of the fluidics lines in the flow cell with 10% bleach, followed by DI water, and finally by ethanol is the same process as the FACSMatters family. So we're getting the same result. Okay, so now that we've looked at decontaminating our fluidics, another common concern, especially in the situation of an aerosolization, this could occur and likely will occur inside of our sort block, which is depicted here. So in addition to preparing for aseptic sort, it's always good practice to decontaminate our external surfaces of the respective self-sorting platform as well. So the sort block that is depicted here is going to be the same regardless of whether you have one of the sorters from the FACSMatters family or the FACSMatters. So in addition to the inside of our sort chamber, on the right here we have a few other surfaces that we should consider decontaminating. And these are going to include our deflection plates, as well as our sample loading port, and your collection devices as well that sit below that sort block. Okay, so all of these surfaces are potentially exposed to, or are exposed to sheath, and so they can potentially become contaminated. And you can clean all of these surfaces with a dampened cloth that has 10% bleach solution, followed by DI water and left to dry. So now that we've discussed decontamination, one of the things that I'd like to discuss is long-term shutdown or storage of our instruments, particularly in the wake of situations like what many of us are experiencing now, where it's led to a shutdown of our labs. We may not be, using our instruments for multiple weeks at this point, typically much longer than our instruments are shut down, for example, over a weekend, right? So in the event that your instrument needs to be shut down for an extended period of time that exceeds a week, We've put together a set of guidelines and instructions to help store instruments based on the type of platform you may be using for your self-sorting. In general, our recommendations include, where applicable, using fresh absolute ethanol that's diluted down to 70%. In terms of the type of ethanol, you want to avoid denatured ethanol or any other methanol-containing fluids in your cytometer. You also always want to use fresh diluted 10% bleach for maximum efficacy. Using sterile DI water rather than distilled, and also make sure to use dedicated filters based on the fluid they will come in contact with where applicable. It's important that you dispose of all liquid waste according to your respective institutional guidelines, as this can vary based on your specific institutional rules. So it's always a good idea to consult with your local EH&S and determine how you should be disposing of this liquid waste. And so after a period of storage greater than a week, it is recommended that you also replace your fluidic filters, reconnect any disconnected lines where applicable, and flush with the appropriate sheath fluid. So specifically looking at the FACSMatters family of cell sorters, and this also includes from a document our FACSymphony S6, which is a high parameter cell sorter. It's recommended to perform the prepare for aseptic sort procedure, as we've previously seen. And then at the completion, since this is going to be stored for long term, we recommend emptying the 5-liter bleach tank that is on your fluidics cart, refilling with sterile DI water, and priming to clear that bleach from the lines as an additional step for extended storage beyond a week. And again, always remember, you can consult your respective user guide for specific details on the prepare for aseptic sort procedure. And you can always contact us as well if you have specific questions. For long-term storage of the BD FACSMelody cell sorter, it's going to be recommended to perform a long-term shutdown. And this particular mode on this platform is going to replace our fluidics with 70% ethanol. You can access the long-term storage, the long-term shutdown from the cytometer tab in the FACScore software. Once you've added 2.5 liters of 70% ethanol to the empty sheet tank, or if you have an extra dedicated long-term shutdown tank for ethanol. On bringing the system out of storage, you will want to perform the extended fluidic startup. And again, more information is also found with detailed instructions in the BD FACSMelody cell sorting user guide. And you'll find this in the user guide located in the procedures for shutting down the system and running extended fluidic startup, respectively. So in closing, I wanted to discuss or possibly bring to your attention a few additional resources that may assist you in helping establish SOPs with your local EH&S personnel. So especially in light of our current situation with COVID-19, I want to remind everybody that this information and best practices is often updated or changed on a daily basis. And many of us have experienced this in our institutions where the information we may have today may evolve tomorrow based on new discovery or new findings. And so that being said, this collection of resources will give you some of the most up-to-date information, especially with respect to COVID-19. This includes the Center for Disease Control and Prevention COVID-19 website. There's also the interim guidelines for collecting, handling, and testing of specimens from persons with COVID-19, which is also a CDC website. the interim lab biosafety guidelines for handling specimens associated with COVID-19, which is also from the CDC. And finally, from the CDC, there's also an FAQ about biosafety and COVID-19. The WHO also has guidance on lab biosafety with respect to COVID-19 as another resource. And as a final note on this, always take this information that you're collecting with regard to your sample handling and cell sorting to develop institutional specific guidelines and SOPs with your local EH&S personnel. A few additional resources, the ISAC website on biosafety guidelines. This is where BD Biosciences has also gone to develop a lot of our biosafety procedures and some of the information that you've heard in this webinar today. That is one of the gold standards in biosafety when it comes to cell sorting. And you can also always get further information about your specific cell sorter by visiting our website, bdbiosciences.com, and navigating to the respective instrument page. So those resources are there for you as well. So with that, I would like to thank all of you for your attendance at this webinar regarding biosafety and sample handling as it relates to cell sorting in the context of BD FACS-ARIA and BD FACS-Melody cell sorting platforms. And at this time, we would like to open this up to any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Max and Janine, for that wonderful presentation. We are now in the Q&A portion of the presentation, and we have quite a number of questions that have come in. So I'm going to start with the first, which is how often should the BSC be cleaned or decontaminated, and what is the process?
Okay, sure. I can take that question. So that's a good one. And part of that is going to depend on the frequency of use and, more importantly, your site-specific guidelines. In some cases, depending on what you're running or just your site-specific EH&S guidelines, they may mandate this process after each sort. Again, depending on what specimens are being run, what they've been infected with, et cetera, for an instrument that's housed in the BSC. For the FACS-ARIA family, we do have a VHL procedure that was written by Baker as safe to use with the instrument in the hood. But again, the guidelines should be followed based on your site-specific instructions and the specimen type.
Okay, great. Deneen, do you have anything to add? If not, I'll just go to the next question.
No, that's okay.
Okay. So our next question is how do you recommend validating that the Whisper AMO is working correctly?
Well, the Whisper AMO, we do have the user's guide, but within the Whisper AMO, there is a gauge on the front of it when you turn it on, and it will tell you at what level the AMO is working. And like I said in the discussion in the talk, you run it at a 20% level, and if a clog occurs, then you increase it to 100%, increase the level to 100%, and it runs for 60 seconds to remove any aerosols that may have happened when the clog occurred. But in the gauge on the AMO should indicate the level or when the filter needs to be replaced and at what level the AMO is working correctly. And you have to confirm that the tubing that goes into the instrument as well as the section that goes into the AMO is connected correctly with and sealed tightly.
Okay, good. And so our next question is, someone in the audience wants to know, is in the hood integrated AMS, does that use the hood HEPA filter, or is there some other filter that needs to be replaced?
I'll have to check on the Baker's user guide and website to confirm. I don't want to give the wrong answer, so I can get back to you on that and provide those answers to you at a later date. But I want to confirm that for sure, that that it's the HEPA filter. So if I can get back to you, that would be great.
I believe there is a HEPA filter in it. We can definitely confirm that. And in terms of the replacement of that, as many of you probably know, your hoods are inspected and dated and required to be inspected regularly. So whether that's Baker directly or most oftentimes, especially in the U.S., like a third party such as TSS, there are various things based on Baker's specs that they are looking for and checking and replacing to make sure that all of the specs are still met when they are inspected.
Okay, great. Okay, our next question is, what is the best detergent to clean the flow cell and not damage the orange or on the nozzle? The O-ring on the nozzle.
Let's see.
Max, do you want to take that, or do you want?
Sure. So the flow cell clean, we have a detergent that BD sells for our platforms. It's a citrinox-based type detergent. Typically, we try to stay away from things like Contrad, especially high concentrations. That's something that we haven't necessarily validated on our platform for use to come into contact with our flow cells. And then, let's see, what was the other? And then the main thing, with respect to the O-ring on the nozzle, to kind of digress a little bit here, is often as a cleaning procedure, when the nozzle's still on and the stream is running, we'll recommend to decontaminate by running a 10% bleach solution, or you could use FACSClean, for example, which is ready to go, and run that for 5 minutes as a sample, and then follow that with DI water for 5 minutes to help flush that out so that our samples, our next sample doesn't see that and is killed. But in the context of when the nozzle is on the instrument and it's running, the interior of that O-ring is all that sees the solution. So the main thing is you want to avoid, for example, most commonly when you're sonicating a nozzle, for example, is when you would have it removed and fully submerged in a solution. And when you're doing that, it is always, always recommended that you only put that in DI water and sonicate very briefly. We also have a nozzle FAQ that is on our website. And in that case, you can subject it to ethanol, but I would recommend that you do that more sparingly. And then if you have sonicated it or rinsed it in ethanol as a decontamination, I would put that back into DI water just to make sure you kind of rinse that off. And that'll help kind of protect your O-ring from drying out, cracking, or decreasing the lifespan of that.
Okay, and I think you may have touched on some details for this question, but one person is asking, how does the flow cell clean procedure work and what happens during the flow cell clean?
With the flow cell clean, you're using the integrated nozzle in the flow cell, and you're placing the detergent or water if the instructions indicate water, and it loads up into the sample injection port, and it floods the flow cell, and the liquid that leaves the flow cell goes out through the integrated nozzle.
Yeah, the flow cell cleaner will have the closed loop. It's an integrated, but the closed loop nozzle.
Yeah,
just
the closed
to
loop.
clarify.
I meant the closed loop. Yeah, sorry, I meant the closed loop. Yeah.
Okay. Someone is also asking, with the FAT melody, do you have to use all the time inside the biosafety cabinet, or just when you need to? And if it's when you need to, is it necessary to align the optic?
So the biosafety cabinet option is going to be more of an all or nothing thing. It's not really that you're going to want to sort in it one week and then remove it the next. Your field service engineer, when they come, if you, for example, buy a Melody and you buy the biosafety cabinet, the field service engineer is actually going to install your instrument and set it up inside that BSC. And so you don't really want to move it outside of that BSC once it's been done. That would require another field service engineer visit in order to do that. And so really if you find that there is even somewhat of a need to run in a BSC, you would want to run it in there all the time, not really bring it in and out, because kind of to address the end of that question, the lasers in that particular instrument are aligned by the FSE, so there's not going to be like a day-to-day alignment or anything like that would be occurring. So again, it just kind of comes back to, anytime the instrument is moved or something like that, you kind of want to leave it where it is and run it rather than moving it in and out.
And I would like to add to that as well. When you are using the Melody, you should have the biosafety cabinet turned on while even if you're not sorting your cells, you have to remember you are still creating droplets and you're running samples through the instrument, which even though it's not being sorted, a clog can occur, which will cause, it may cause an aerosol.
Okay, great. I'm seeing a lot of questions coming around 70% ethanol, and so they're asking, can you use 70% ethanol versus 10% bleach to clean the sort block? And then related to that, someone's also asking, can you use 70% ethanol to clean the external surfaces as well?
So our recommendation in the user's guide for all of this and what we validated is to use a dampened cloth with 10% bleach to decontaminate that rather than 70% ethanol. And it does look as well like on one of these questions, there's an additional question about contact time between bleach and then water. And the contact time is going to be more dependent on the specimens being run. So different specimens will have different contact times with bleach, which is you can find from the CDC website. There's quite a wide range of different specimens and what they require to effectively kill them. And so that would be, more so the guideline there. Is the type of specimen.
Okay. Someone says, regarding the question on the standalone AMO, the filter should nominally last 180 hours. At a 20% suction rate, the filter flow gauge should be in water. Okay. Another one. That someone says, I have heard different running times of AMS before you should handle the clog. You mentioned 60 seconds earlier. Is that an established timing?
That is a guideline on the AMO from I included the PDF in one of the slides that we have on our BD website, and it indicates running it for a time period of 60 seconds at 100% efficiency running before you open up the sort block and remove your samples. So based on the Buffalo filter recommendations, 60 seconds is what they indicate on their PDF on our website.
Okay. And for the AMS HEPA filter, is this the BSC normal filters, or are you talking about something extra?
Oh, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? You broke up.
Sure. Oh, sorry. For the AMS HEPA filter, is this the BSC normal filters, or is it something extra?
I would have to refer to the Baker's Biosafety Cabinet user's guide and confirm with the user guide to find out exactly what type of HEPA filter it is before I give, before we, I don't want to say, but we can provide that information.
Okay. Good. And what is the potential risk of aerosols from the waste cap on the sorters?
So there is a filter that is in the waste cap, and that is what that's intended for. So really it's a matter of maintaining and changing those out. Our recommendation is once a month. But again, if there's condensation or something that's built up in that and people are inverting those caps, you can essentially wet those filters, and they'll need to be changed more frequently in that type of a case.
And not allowing the waste tank to fill up over the recommended level to prevent any moisture going into that cap, because you don't want that filter to get wet.
Okay, good. And then just Max, this is for you, the product that you mentioned for detergent, what is the name?
Oh, it's just detergent solution concentrate, nothing fancy.
Okay.
If you search that on our website, you should find it.
Okay, good. Someone wants to know, can you use 70% isopropyl alcohol rather than ethanol? Our recommendation on that is just to use ethanol and make sure that you're using the standard ethanol, so definitely don't use denatured or something like that has methanol in it as well.
Yeah, the absolute ethanol.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this question is related to downtime. So if they don't plan on running any samples for 1 to 2 weeks, what procedures can they run weekly to keep the system healthy?
So weekly, we do have a customer-facing document that came out in wake of COVID-19 and this idea that many labs were shutting down for extended periods of time. And so it will be a little bit platform-specific, but we can look at, sending this out to the list of attendees possibly for instructions, but really, for example, in the ARIA, it's going to involve, doing that prepare for aseptic sort that'll help you decontaminate, and then following that, to take your bleach tank and flush it with water just so that bleach is not sitting in there over time, because that can, as it sort of evaporates, it can also form crystals, for example. But we can definitely look at sending that out as well if that's helpful.
Okay, very good. And we're coming now, maybe this is the last question. So can sorters go in any BSC?
So I think we, let's see. So in terms of this question, the ARIA family and the Melody works with Baker to design the cabinets that fulfills all of the safety guidelines for the respective instruments. So, and that's also what we validate the instruments in. So some of you may be familiar that these hoods work off laminar flow based on what is in those hoods. The specifications for the operation of that hood would be specific to what all is inside of it. And so the short answer really is no. We wouldn't necessarily recommend that you run them in any BSE, as we don't know how, what the settings are on that particular BSE and whether or not, the footprint of a Melody versus an ARIA, those settings are sufficient to protect the user.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, thank you, Max and Deneen, for this presentation and also for this very lively Q&A. We tried to get to as many questions as we can. So thank you for attending the webinar. Please note that there will be CE credits given to attendees, so please look out for an email with more details. And then also a recording of this presentation will be available on the webinars playlist of the BD Biosciences YouTube channel, and then also on the webinars page at bdbiosciences.com. And so thank you once again. Thank you, Max and Deneen, and we hope you found this useful to you, and have a great day. Thanks for joining us.